Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is yet another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you to break down, continue to get through this whirlwind of what used to be off season, but now it's seemingly 24/7 tournament coverage as EWC wraps up and we're rolling right into Kespa Cup, and that just seems the perfect time to do some actual LCK power rankings heading into rounds 3 and 4. And obviously, as EWC champions, Dplus Kia, no money to their name, but they've got to be immediately number 1 in the LCK, right? That's how it works?
Oh, whoa. Let's pump the brakes on that one a little bit here. Depending on wherever the side of the fence you fall on the EWC, I think you can take a critical look at that tournament, the format, the scheduling of it, and how things are played out. Best of 3 for a large part of it, all these things. And you can certainly step away from it and go, that is not the same as looking at First Stand, MSI, Worlds, whatever of the international tournaments on the official schedule that you can look at. This period where it used to be the summer break, off season, kind of get yourself together before that final push. There's no put your feet up. It is right. Keep working at it and keep going at the grindstone. And that is simply the case because the LCK right back into the swing of things. Kespa Cup. Isn't this a great year for the scheduling change of this event to fall right into this window right here? Because it's going to take us straight in, of course, to that LCK next part of the season, running all the way through to the World Championship.
Yeah, and this Kespa Cup tournament that's like a month long will be running at times through the LCK season, which is absolutely insane. You've got to imagine there's going to be a lot of academy rosters, especially for the big 3 in the LCK that were just playing at this EWC. Ain't no way they're going to be sending their main starting 5. But yes, despite Dplus coming away with a very surprising championship, international championship, even if it's a Mickey Mouse tournament that doesn't fully count, they are not the top team heading into rounds 3 and 4. Of course, that is still Hanwha Life, MSI champions, already coming in as first place in the LCK as these standings carry over from rounds 1 and 2.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where I think, of course, it makes sense with all the regions to take that, pulse check as we move towards this next part of the year. But very much so, I think none other than the LCK is the most important one to look at. But you're not going to see that type of real, knee-jerk reaction type of situation to how things played out from the EWC. The one squad that is going to be removed from almost all of that, of course, is Hanwha Life at the very top, doing everything that they did at MSI. Despite being, seconds, a team fight away type of situation from being kicked out by North America, they do come through and find that Power Ultimate trophy at the end of it all, and they got to have them at the top of the LCK.
Yeah, and like we saw the highs of them from MSI, even though they had, struggled against Lion or were pushed by them and lost to BLG. What you saw, the quality of gameplay in those MSI finals, more than enough to have Hanwha in this top spot, even though they lose a rematch against T1 in the quarterfinals. We are not taking, especially Hanwha's performance at that event, too seriously.
No, again, this timing of it and everything on top of what you already were going to think about that event and things about it. The simple fact of where the timing is for this time around, and given what has happened, everything beforehand, First Stand, and how there wasn't really much of a break period and everything else, really does play into that. And not taking too much from that, I think the big thing to take away from Hanwha Life, though, is seeing Gumayushi put his stamp on this team, on some of the history and the performance here. I think it was a little bit tepid at first, a little bit cautious in some of these situations. And I think now we're starting to see him go, I'm the Gumayushi from T1. I've got the World Championships backing up my name. Let me show you why I was pursued to this type of degree by Hanwha Life.
And see if they can continue that momentum, because outside of Hanwha is where things, okay, maybe you can debate a little bit, but I think heading into this split, even though they finished third, even though they didn't go to MSI, you got to be looking at Gen G as the number 2 squad heading into this. And okay, maybe you take a tiny bit. Yeah, sure, they beat T1 at EWC. T1 lost again to a European squad. But even if you remove that whole tournament together, The fashion that T1 was eliminated at MSI, how close the qualification was in that road to MSI, I think it's pretty easy and clear to put Gen G ahead of T1 heading into this next split.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those ones where you're maybe kind of getting the raw end of the deal here as T1 being exposed in that fashion in some of these down moments that have happened recently on the international stage, where you don't have that when you're looking at Gen G, and you are thinking of a Gen G that has been burned, got spurned in this opportunity to represent for Korea at MSI, and is looking for revenge, for that bounce back in this next split, and has had this time to rest, to be away in comparison to some of these other squads that are going to be on this type of road that we have had since MSI. So very much so looking at that bounce back for Gen G. I'm not going to go crazy and get out the trucks out to T1 headquarters given those results in that situation. I think it is absolutely one of those ones where it's maybe hesitant, over that alarm button and realizing that, okay, number one, T1 needs to be sharper, but the level of competition, the position that the game and meta is in the one where those opportunities will exist for the West, for top tier squads from the LEC, from the LCS. You need to be prepared and need to be better than you have been at these points throughout this year. And I think that is going to be where the targets should be shifting, or should be kind of assessing for T1 in this turbulent times in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think, back to Gen G, it's the first time we're seeing them have to prove a bounce back. Yes, they have some bow outs, disappointments at Worlds, but then you have an entire offseason before you're looking for a bounce back. This is the first time within the calendar year that you're going, you didn't even qualify for MSI. You lost to T1 in the fashion that you did, and you were as shaky as Gen G has been in the last 3 years throughout the entirety of the LCK regular season. And this is the same starting five. There were some underperformances from, at times, pretty much everybody not named Chovy, who still had a fantastic run. But yeah, we're looking okay. There's another big heavy hitter in Hanwha Life, and Gen G, can you get back to that elite form? And I'm thinking it's still quite possible for the boys.
It is maybe my delusion and just how great we have seen Gen G be in the past, that I can envision this lineup getting to a tier that we haven't maybe seen from the rest of the LCK so far at that very top. Yes, Hanwha Life has been excellent. Yes, T1 has been explosive and exciting at times, but very much so we have not seen that dominant force and form that Gen G has been able to be for the last 2-3 years plus in the LCK. I think that you can see them, again, if things go right, if you do have that hunger, that desire to look at the games that we have seen on the international stage and go, why can't that be me? Why can't my skill be that difference maker, be that one that is celebrated? You got to think that Gen G is looking for that bounce back.
And yes, right behind them, I think you're pretty obviously putting T1 in that lineup, and you kind of alluded to, okay, maybe there's things to be concerned about, as we have seen them swing from the T1 circus to some T1 cinema, multiple times throughout this year so far. And I think, specifically, we got the huge level up from the bot lane. Pays and Kyria looked much better throughout MSI, but it was definitely the solo lanes that were sus at MSI. I know the Doran truck was there, but Faker wasn't exactly his normal international self at this midseason invitational either.
Yeah, there were still, some big plays and still, the exact iconic type of moments that you come to expect from him. But there was also a lot more question marks and a lot more oopsies than I think even he would like to have in these type of situations. Look at Doran, of course, in that top side. I think that's certainly one of those ones where the weak performance was a downfall of T1, but one of those ones where I think it's nothing, again, talking about trucks and whatever, there's no real option outside to go towards in this situation. And it's really just going to be about, can you not get as bad, as low as giving over advantages the way that Doran was at MSI. And I think that is something that can stabilize for T1, looking at the other half of this year that we have had played, he was one of the more stable members of this T1 lineup. I think looking, and of course, Faker will always be the guy that will be able to deliver. Having the bottom lane be that what they were at MSI is a good sign. I am a little concerned as, again, I think we are going to see a heavy shift towards those awesome dudes, those different type of carries down in the bottom lane. And yes, the Mel is fantastic. Yes, we've seen certain other things from Pays, the Kaisa, and whatever be able to deliver. Is there enough that is different when you are going to be coming across really some creative options that are going to be able to accelerate the game in different aspects?
Yeah, Pays is less so a playstyle kind of guy that you want to be seeing on Ziggs because he's so aggressive. And even Gumayushi talked about, it's not the most fun meta or impactful meta when these are the main picks coming down in the bot lane. But the reason I mentioned the solo lanes, like Faker and Doran have been fine. But the problem is Chovy, Keen, Zeka, Zeus are like the featured part of these rosters and are absolutely elite in that status.
Fine isn't enough is really the long and short of that there. And it's one of those ones where not only in the environment of the LCK, which is this focus, but towards the international stage, that is not enough anymore. You have to have your solo laners be decisive players, be game breakers, game changers, for good or bad in a lot of these situations, as we see with some of these lineups. But you got to find a way to be anything but just average, just the middle type of thing. And I think for T1, you can look obviously at Faker and count on, we've got a history where we can find those type of moments, that type of play. Doran is certainly going to be, I think, a little bit more of a question mark, and really is going to be about how is that bounce back coming back from this underperformance at MSI.
Tell you who doesn't need a bounce back now are the latest champions of the international scene. And this is a bit of a change because, of course, they had the heartbreaking reverse sweep loss to KT Rolster, but Dplus Kia, maybe the biggest impact of this Mickey Mouse tournament is giving a little bit of credit where credit is due in the extreme circumstance of not getting paid, having their future highly in question. They come away with this run, and again, it's just the perfect amount of hopium for Dplus Kia that we need heading into this next split.
Oh, man, and there is no other squad that this type of copium injection here is more dangerous than a squad like this from Dplus Kia, because as you laid out, they weren't really all that far off from being towards that top end, that final challenge in the LCK, and frankly, should have been getting themselves further when you look back at that KT series and how things played out. So DK getting this type of boost back in their sales, getting this type of result where you're going, all right, we are, kind of right the ship. We are not as bad as maybe people had written about us or the negative moments in the last couple of weeks that we had. Let's focus for this next grouping up here. Let's take down these top tier targets in the LCK and set ourselves up for a world championship run. I think that's got to be the dream here. And as you also laid out, a lifeline to the Dplus Kia organization. I don't know how many more sponsors we can throw into Dplus Kia as a name, but we need a couple more if these guys aren't getting paid in any type of way, but very much so the EWC cash inflow is going to feel nice for the organization.
The Disney Plus memes for Dplus not going to work anymore because they're not getting that Disney Plus money, obviously. So we got to think of some new names, but they'll probably just be a new organization come 2027 anyways for those guys. But yeah, the potential, the bare, I think, minimum expectations now for this team should be getting at least one of the 4 slots at the World Championship, especially because even though KT went 13-5, yes, again, we had that head-to-head. They were up 2-0. They had like a 5K gold lead in that 5th and decisive final game against KT Rolster. And now as Kespa has warmed up, we've seen both Sylvie and Palu have played for KT. Obviously, there's not really anything to take into that. Actually, fully expect Cuz and probably effort to come back into that lineup. Kespa rosters are just a true enigma and mystery.
Yeah, which, as you also laid out before, is going to be running alongside this early start to the start back to the LCK split. Very much so, not expecting to see a lot of the full lineups there. Maybe Dplus Kia is going to have the Disney Plus agreement to have the full lineup come out for those matches. Who knows? But for a squad like KT, I think the only real thing here left, despite some positive-ish signs, I would say, throughout that last split at times, really is going to come down to what we have seen from the rest of the LCK and whether you can bank on more heroic BDD performances. That is simply the only factor to me that brings KT even close to a conversation with the likes of Dplus, Kia, and T1. Never mind a conversation with then the Gen G and the Hanwha Life that still exists in the big ocean of the LCK. It's going to be some tough sledding here for KT unless, again, it is the Miracle Atlas type of performances coming out of BDD.
And again, on this format, this is a speed run to burnout because most of these Kespa matches are going to be going down Monday, Tuesday, which means you're looking at an LPL level of scheduling in the LCK from Monday to Sunday. There will be games for the majority of this third split.
And this is a massive departure from the history of the LCK, which again, keep in mind, you could look at LCS and LEC, whatever. You've had some flip-flopping around towards the weekend, Friday, Monday, figuring that out. The LCK has always been this Wednesday going through until that Sunday, and then it resets, and you have that break, you have that time away. Having the Kespa Cup run alongside it, and even as minimal as you want to say it is, an involvement of the academy squads, whatever, that is a distraction for the organization, for the preparement and the coaching staffs, everything going on. It will have an effect. Do not underestimate that into this season of the LCK. It's
just so insane. We used to be screaming for more tournaments when you only got Worlds and maybe MSI, and now you throw in EWC Kespa in the middle of the year. We're going to have Esports Nations Cup at the end, and it's like, I feel bad for these teams now.
It's the feeling of everyone avoiding Grand Theft Auto 6's release, and Ryan just going, okay, everything into August, September, October, who cares? Avoid November. I don't know what it is you're trying to necessarily avoid. Maybe it's some secret Valorant thing going on. I don't know. I'm not following that. I'm telling you now, in League of Legends, this scheduling, this absolutely cannot last.
And with that, we got to look at the second half of this board. That was all the Legends group. That's fine and dandy, but how about the Fries, boys? Down in that bottom half, and I guess if you're going off of how the last split ended, you would probably say you're feeling the most positive for potential with BNK Firax, maybe Hanj and Brion, who both shown, signs of being competitive with the top five, some pushback, some high-level gameplay. Taeyun comes into BNK and is an absolute world beater for them. But the actual brain should be saying Nongshim with Diablo and the rookies should be much better than they were last split. They got a 3-0 start to Kespa, so that's something to go on, and this is the actual starting five that have been playing for them.
And that is the good early sign that you wanted to see, needed to see from a group like this that had the changes and has had some disappointments and everything else. You needed to have this one come through like this and start out in this type of fashion, and it needs to continue. It needs to be that rocketing up type of tier in this lower half of the LCK. You need to prove it. Prove out. Show you are the top tier type of quality, and that this is simply a result of bad timing, poor execution early, all sorts of things that can lead you to resulting down here in this side of the groupings. But you got to prove that you are in the wrong pond, that you are a bigger fish willing to take on the bigger fights in the LCK. And right now, again, on paper, Nongshim to me is the one that stands out as being this grouping that should be a quality above everybody else here and should get that opportunity up against the top tier in the LCK. Good early start from them, as you mentioned, in that Kespa Cup.
And this was a team that we thought, even before Diablo was on the roster, we're going, they could punch up to top four. They could be in that conversation with KT and Dplus being their king and Scout Lahens. Yes, these are guys who are championship level players, even if they're past maybe the years where you were talking about them in that elite status. But yeah, just obviously they had the disaster start, and Diablo didn't make it any better as they went on a huge losing streak. Aside from that, really any actual offseason news was really only the DN Supers, who obviously are at the bottom of a very deep hole after being 3-34 overall, but it sounds like Piotric's going to be out. Charvel comes in as their new starting jungler. Is that the savior they need? No, probably not when you're 1-17 to start.
Be honest with you, again, outside of seeing a miraculous, again, a good early sign turnaround from Nongshim down in this group, and maybe if you are of the select few that is a believer in BNK getting their type of stuff together and finding it again, or the bros and the magic that they've had in some of these runs, outside of that, there is not anything going on in this lower group of the LCK. I'll tell you that right now. When you are looking at it, as far as looking for life, looking for a sign, something interesting, something to change it up. No, you're looking at Nongshim, and I'm telling you right now, whether if that one is on business, that's your horse. Otherwise, you can maybe pay attention to the BNK and Bro storyline.
Yeah, and it's too bad because, like last year we had Dplus was hanging in fries, and you were like, well, there's someone who can punch up. KT's getting beat up in that Legends group and obviously eventually go all the way to the World Finals. But there was at least someone that you were excited about maybe leveling up. But it really just feels like this third split here, the LCK is separated to the actual LCK and almost the tier 2 squads. That is fully how this top 5, bottom 5 feels.
Right, and it's only going to get worse because, again, the only competition that you are going to be sharpening yourself up against in that top tier is the very best of the best. These Goliath type of teams, you're only going to get better. You're only going to hone in your strategies more in this type of situation, and that's not the same environment that you are in that lower group, and especially this year around where you aren't given that benefit of a squad like DK, as you mentioned before, who had proven even last year, despite the bad results, that they might have a chance against those upper tier teams. That doesn't really exist here in this lower group right now. That's why I said a squad like Nongshim needs to show out. They need to dominate down here in the bottom tier to even sniff a chance of an opportunity when you're looking at those top tier teams in the LCK.
A loss to the top 5 might be more valuable than winning in that Rise group. That's just kind of the state of the league that it's in right now. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute stunners. Thanks for hanging out as always. And we'll catch you on that flippity flip.